I'm a full-time landlord. My portfolio is based down in sunny Southend. I'm an Essex girl, apologies to everyone from Suffolk. And I also have a portfolio in Manchester and Liverpool. So my stock really does vary from new build all the way through to Victorian, and they each present different challenges when you're talking about damp, condensation and mould. Let's have a look and see what we are going to look at today. So, what does the law say? What's the black and white on it in terms of what we should be doing as landlords? What happens if you get it wrong? We'll look at the consequences. You'll know a lot of them, and I will ask you to shout a lot of them out to me. But it's really, it focuses the mind, actually, when you look at the consequences of getting this wrong for us as landlords. We'll look at the 5 Ps, or their 6 Ps if you're from Essex, and I'll show you those. We'll look at knowing your tenant and knowing your property as well, knowing what challenges that you are potentially going to face, and we'll look at how do we set ourselves as landlords up for success. We want this to go right. We want healthy properties for our tenants. We want happy tenants. What are the things that we need to do to make sure that that happens? This is boring, this bit, but it's important. What are your legal obligations? So there are 5 pieces of legislation that cover damp, mould and condensation. The first one is the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985. And if you want to sleep well tonight and have a little bit of bedtime reading, you can read section 11, which in summary says, the landlord is obliged to keep in repair the structure and exterior of the dwelling house, and to keep in repair and proper working order the installations, for example, sanitation and heating. You've also got another piece of legislation, defective premises, 1972. The landlord is liable if damage or injury results from disrepair. You've got the Environmental Protection Act 1990. So you can be prosecuted if the premises is prejudicial to health. So you don't fix the banister, tenant falls down the stairs because they haven't got a banister to hold on to, you can be prosecuted. We've also got the Homes Fitness for Human Habitation Act 2018. So this applies to all tenancies. This became retrospective in March 2020 and so covers all tenancies in England. So the landlord must ensure that the dwelling is fit for human habitation at the beginning and for the duration of the tenancy. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on, but we need to think about what our obligations are as landlords. So when your tenant moves in, how do you prove that that property is ready for that tenant and is suitable? What does your inventory look like? Are you doing the inventory yourself? Are you having a third party do your inventory? So I can tell you what I do. I have a third party comes in and does my inventory. So it's photographic and written, so they're completely independent of me. On the day the tenant moves in, I film them in the property with me and we describe every single room together. We agree the condition of that property. We test the windows, that we show that they're opening, we test all the extractor fans, we show that every part of the property is fit, proper and working. And then I have evidence of the condition that it is handed over to that tenant in. We'll look at property visits later on because they are key to making sure that your property is healthy. Specifically, so this is specific wording that is within this Act, specifically freedom from damp and adequate ventilation. So we've also got some case law that has come under fitness for human habitation. So there was Rendlesham Estates plc versus Oars and Bar, and the judge in that case said at the end of the case, the presence of mould and damp in living rooms or bedrooms, if persistent and more than minor, renders the apartment unfit for habitation. And always you have to look at the case law because that defines how the actual law is manifested in practicality. What does that really look like on a ground level? And we've got case law under that one. You've got one more. and that is the HHSRS system. So if you guys haven't had any exposure to the HHSRS system, I like to think of it as a checklist. So you have a visit from an environmental health officer and they walk in with a checklist with 29 different areas, 29 different hazards, and they will rate your property on those hazards. So they will look at the likelihood of harm arising within a 12-month period and the seriousness of that harm to the most vulnerable in our society. So obviously the young and the old. And damp and mould is one of those specific 29 areas. What are the consequences? What happens if we get this wrong, guys? We all know who this young man is, Awab Ishak. He paid the ultimate price for his landlord. He was a social landlord, but he paid the ultimate price for his landlord getting this wrong. That is why it's so important today that we are here and we are learning together. Death is obviously the ultimate price, but actually, as we've already heard this morning, health and the effect on our tenants' health is actually way more common. Asthma accounts for 1,500 deaths per year. Those with asthma that live with visible dampness, it will increase their occurrence of their asthma by 50%. So I buy properties quite often that have damp and mould issues. And my husband is he's asthmatic and he's a landlord alongside me. He cannot go into the properties when we buy them. He can't go in them until they're completely refurbed because of the effect that the damp and the mould in those properties will have on his asthma. Over time, asthmatics become more sensitised to allergic materials, and 20 to 30% of asthma sufferers are sensitised to mould spores. Even if you don't have asthma, it will affect your respiratory system. It can cause asthma, eye inflammation, gastral problems. There's also the mental health side of it. I bought a property a couple of years ago. It was a 3-bed terrace property, covered, riddled in damp and mould, disgusting. I actually was embarrassed buying it, but we bought it and we moved the family out immediately. The property needed gutting and putting back together. And while I was dealing with the mum, she had an 11-year-old daughter, and we were obviously moving her into another one of our rental properties. We were chatting, and she said to me, "Do you know what? My daughter will not have friends home." And I said, "Why?" She is so ashamed of this property and the way that it looks, and Mum was doing everything she could to keep on top of everything, but actually the fabric of the building wasn't suitable. That child was becoming socially isolated at school because of the condition of her property at home. And it was a facet I'd never thought about, and I was just mortified for this family. So actually, damp and mould, physical health, yes, but mental health as well. Consequences legal. So we've spoken about what the consequences are to our tenants, but what are the consequences to us as landlords? What happens to us if we get it wrong? Obviously, I've shown you the law, and local authorities and tenants can take it upon themselves to take action against us. And what does that look like? An improvement notice. So in my time working with local authorities, normally an environmental health officer will have a conversation and say, "Hey, look, this is what the problem is, this is what we need you to do, and this is what we need that to look like." If you go away and do that, life's good, everybody's happy. If you don't, in my experience, they then move through to improvement notice. So an improvement notice is, we need you to do this, we need you to do it by this time, and in the event that you don't, obviously you are opening yourselves up to more consequences. You could get a prohibition order, you could have suspended action, a hazard awareness notice, or in the worst possible case, a demolition order. And I've probably bought a couple of those that should have had a demolition order. Penalties for you guys or for us for non-compliance. Criminal prosecution, civil prosecution, unlimited fines. You can just write a blank cheque. Rent repayment orders as well. These are becoming more common. So your tenant does not have to go to the local authority and get the local authority to prosecute you. They can actually go to property tribunal and they can take you through that and get rent repaid for a period of time that the property wasn't suitable for them to live in. And you're seeing more and more of that. Okay, so we've got some consequences to our business as well. Guys, give me some consequences to our business, just to make sure you're all still awake. What can go wrong in our business if we don't address these issues? Lose tenants, absolutely. I've bought places where they've got quality, what I would call quality tenants, been in there 5-6 years, want a nice home, want to look after their home. They've got damp and mould. The landlord's not doing anything about it. What's that tenant going to do? They're going to move. And if they're a good tenant, there are lots of good landlords out there that want that tenant. So you're going to churn your tenant. When you churn your tenant, what happens? What have you got to do to your property? We've got to refurb it, haven't we? There's more money. While we're refurbing it, what's going on? Who's paying the council tax? Whoop! Who's paying the mortgage? Whoop! More money, yeah? There are lots of consequences. We've got tenant churn, voids, redecoration costs, tenant fine fees. If you're using an agent, they're heavy now, aren't they? Oh! Risk of getting a poor tenant. So you lose a good tenant for a poor tenant. And then what's a poor tenant going to do? Not pay the rent, trash the property, you've got more grief. Prevention in a property is always much better than cure. Okay, you are also risking your reputation. I do not ever want to be known as the landlord that allows my tenants to live in a hovel, in a place that you wouldn't live yourself. Okay, other dampness effects. So you don't get it right in your property. We've looked at prosecution. We've looked at your reputation. Actually, it's having an effect on the building. Do you like my split pipe? We all know as landlords what happens when you leave the pipes unlagged, it freezes and the pipe splits. Yeah? We've all seen that, we've all experienced it, and we all prevent it in our properties. If you've got water ingress in your property and you're not dealing with it, water expands by 9% when it's frozen. What's happening to the bricks and mortar in your building? Splitting, isn't it? Actually, you're causing structural issues. You've also got metal corrosion, so wall ties, nails, metal back boxes on electrical outlets. They are all corroding if you are allowing water ingress or water within your building. Also, heat loss. A wall that is damp is 40% more expensive to heat than a dry wall. Your tenant's paying that, you're not paying that, but is that fair? Okay, I have to be so careful when I say this. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Or you can stick another P in there if you come from Essex. This is a property that I was viewing back in December. We completed on this a couple of weeks ago, actually. And while I was writing this presentation, it pinged into my head. So excuse the picture. It was never taken with the intention of it being part of a presentation. But I thought it kind of summarised my point. We know a lot of the basics around preparing a property, but I see a lot of landlords that don't actually put themselves in their tenants' head. They don't actually live their tenants' lives. So this is a 2-bed, first floor flat with no garden. So first thing we need to think about, who's liable to be living in this unit once I've refurbed it and rented it out? Who are we going to get in there? 2-bed, first floor, no garden. Young, yeah, young couple, yeah. What would you let it to? Who would you have in a 2-bed first floor? Young couple, maybe one child, yes. Younger child, probably it's their first child, possibly that's what you're going to get in there. let's have a look at this kitchen. What do I need to be looking at in this kitchen? What do I need to be thinking about? What can you see, guys? What am I missing? What do I need to be looking at practically for this tenant? Pardon? No extraction, absolutely. And I can tell you, this window up here, single glazed and was about to fall out, didn't open. So we've got no extraction in there. What else do we need in there? What are we looking at practically? Tumble dryer, yes. So this is his washing machine. This is Kevin, by the way. Say hello to Kevin. Hi, Kevin. Kevin lives there. He doesn't at the moment. I've moved him into another property for 8 weeks while I refurb it, but he wants to go back. But Kevin just uses a washing machine. How does he dry his clothes? Can we see? Yeah. You can see how he's drying his clothes up there. Kevin has said to me, I do not want a tumble dryer, Joanne. And I said, I do understand that, Kevin. However, you will have a tumble dryer in your kitchen. It is very important that you are able to dry your clothes. We've got no extractor above the oven. So we need to be sitting and looking at our properties and working through what type of tenant is living in there, what should we be providing to enable them to have a healthy and balanced life. There was also no heating in that room, so we had no radiator either, so obviously we're doing a whole new heating system, much to my husband's disgust. Right. Take a practical view on the property. These are all the bits that we've looked at. So for me personally, the most powerful ventilation systems, although after our first speaker today, I'm going back to my electrician and going more than 25 litres per second. So yeah, I'm like, I want that written down. I need to make sure I'm getting that right. But humidistat, not that the tenants can override, that actually they just kick in automatically. Sound levels, think about the sound levels of the units that you're putting in. Clean and working, oh my goodness, the number of ventilation systems that I've seen and they're black and they don't work or they're not looked after. Make sure you're doing that. Also, historic issues. So a bungalow I bought 18 months ago. I bought it because it had a massive leak under the kitchen floor. So we literally pulled up the kitchen floor and there was water pouring into the foundations. Where's that water going? Those walls are sucking that up. Yeah, the walls were absolutely ridden. We have obviously stopped the leak. We have put in a proper damp course. We've done all the work. But where is that water still living? In the walls, absolutely. So that tenant that's moved in there, I've been very careful about my tenant selection. They have a big old dehumid that we have paid for. We have educated them on how to use that dehumid. We are paying towards their electricity bill because that water is still in those walls. I don't believe you can do an element of sealing it in. Personally, I don't want it sealed in my buildings. I want it pulled out and I want my building to be healthy. So we have educated that tenant on how to use the dehumid, why they're using it. So think about any historic issues you've had with damp. Just because you fix the problem, the root cause, doesn't mean that water has just disappeared automatically overnight. A year, a couple of years for that building to dry out. We will then schedule to go back in every 6 months. We'll have the maintenance manager have a look at it, and then we will schedule in repainting and additional works around that. Know your property and prepare your property. So an old Victorian building will behave very differently to a new build. You will have different problems, different weaknesses in those buildings. Understand your property. Do your research. If you're buying something, do your research on it. Do you know what your insulation is when you're buying it? Do you know what grants are available? Obviously dependent on your EPC and a lot of the time your tenant type as well, as we've seen earlier. Know your glazing. Are your trickle vents there? Are they open? Kitchen, bathrooms. One I bought in Benfleet 2 years ago. We've just done a property visit and she has complained about damp and mould. We've got mould spores in the daughter's bedroom and we've got it in the bathroom. We've gone and had a look. Bless her, she's wallpapered the bathroom. What's that doing? It's holding that moisture in, isn't it? Yeah? So we're going back to the tenant. We're doing a piece on education. This is how it works. This is how much water you expel when you breathe. This is how much moisture you expel by having a shower, having a bath. It's lovely. Your wallpaper looks beautiful, Marie. However, it's not practical. We're going back in and we're anti-Glickstone Klein, anti-mould, painting the whole of the kitchen. As we do our refurbs, we use our anti-mould paint in key areas. Window sills, around windows, corners of rooms where you've got 3 external walls. But again, be prepared in your property as to how it's going to behave once it's got people living in it. Know your tenant. Yes, we know our property, we know how our property is going to behave. Know how your tenant is going to behave. Playing pairs. Anyone used to play this? I used to play this with my grandma. You turn over the cards. Oh, I got 2 jacks and 1 in, yeah. And this is how I think about my properties and my tenants. So I do all the viewings. It's the one thing in my business that I do all of. When my tenants come and view, or my applicants come and view, they don't know that I'm the landlord. They think I'm just some ditzy blonde from an agency. But I will meet the tenant and I will understand what type of tenant I've got. If I've got a young couple just moving out, it's their first property, would I have put them in that bungalow that had a historic damp problem and needed a dehumid running and using regularly? Would you? I'm setting them up to fail, aren't I? Because the chances are they won't have that routine so much, they don't have the understanding. So know your property. It was an older lady that I put in and I was completely transparent about the history of the property and I explained what needed to be done and she was more than happy with helping me look after the building. So know your property, know your tenant. If you do your affordability check or if your agency does your affordability check, can they really afford to heat that building? If you have got someone who is on a really tight budget and you are sticking them in a Victorian, single skin, single glazed unit, are they going to be able to stay on top of those bills? Or are you just setting yourself up for having more issues? Yeah? You guys, big brother, you decide. Yeah? What's their history in rental properties? Why are they moving? Again, when I am doing my Ditzy Blonde act, I will always say, oh, why are you looking to move? And a lot of the time they will say to me, I've got damp and mould in my property. I don't immediately think, oh my goodness, well, it's all your fault and there's no way you could have my property. I will ask them, why is that? What is it you've done? Why do you think? You can gauge the level of education and knowledge that your tenant has about how they behave within the property and the challenges that they've got in their building at the moment. What is the tenant support network? You speak about these young couple, it's their first property. Have they got mum and dad or parental figures behind them that says, actually, you know, you can't live in a sealed box with all your windows and everything shut and your washing drying. Have they got that education? Because you as a landlord are going to give them education, absolutely. But they do need additional support around them. So think about the support network. How good is your tenant at communicating? So when a tenant moves into, when we do an application process, each of our applicants have to do a certain number of tick boxes. They don't know they're doing them, but they have to respond to a text. They have to have emailed us something and they have to have phoned us. I want tenants in my properties that are good communicators. Why do I want good communicators in my properties? Absolutely. If there is a problem, I want them to pick up the phone and go, Joanne, this is going on in this house. Yeah? And I want to be there to fix it straight away. I need good communicators. Are you encouraging good communicators in your property? Think about the size of the family in the property. Over-accommodation guaranteed to cause you problems in your units. Yeah? And unfortunately, it's so sad, the number. I would put up a 2-bed flat and the number of families of 4 that I will have, and mum and dad will say, it's okay, we'll sleep in the front room and the kids can have the bedroom. People are so desperate for accommodation and I want to fix that for them, but I won't be helping them long term. I won't be giving them a healthy environment. Again, with your property visits, it's really important you're understanding how many people are really living in your properties. Yeah? What's the effect of over-accommodation in your unit? Okay, so what's your process for success? Systems, systems, systems. Don hates me and my systems and processes. How does your tenant report a problem? So they've got an issue. We know, why is Amazon so popular? It's easy, isn't it? We click on our phones, done. Yeah, make it easy for your tenant to report a problem. We have an online system on their phones. They take a picture, it goes straight through to the office and the guys pick it up within the office. If you're not self-managing, well, ask your agent, interview your agent. You are paying them money. If I was your tenant, how would I report a problem? And then how are you, Mr. Agent, going to tell me, Mr. Landlord, what about that problem? Yeah? Make it easy for them to do it. Once you've got that issue in, how are you going to manage and acknowledge that? If you remember within Fitness for Human Habitation Homes Act 2018, we are obliged to make sure that the property is suitable at the beginning and throughout the tenancy. You need to record, we call them works orders in my business, you need to be recording any works orders that are coming in. You need to be able to record what's come in and what have you done about it, when have you done it and how have you communicated with your tenant. What tradespeople have you got? That was really interesting. The doors, 10 mil at the bottom. That's not in my process, it will be now. Carpenters, you need carpenters for cutting down doors. Vents, you need electricians. Yeah, have you got good tradespeople that will be there when you need them? What support network have you got as a landlord? Obviously, I am going to tell you, you need to join the NRLA, of course, because we're just the best and we'll support you with it. But what support are you getting for yourself? Are you going to networking events? Facebook, bloody marvellous. The number of damp, mould and condensation landlord groups on Facebook. And when I've had a problem and I've put a video up and I'm like, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. I'm stuck. And people come back and go, have you tried this? Oh, wow. Yeah, so Facebook, great for support. But do you know local landlords who've got similar stock to you? Because chances are if you've got the problem, they've had the problem and they've probably solved it and they can save you a whole load of work to find the answers. Property visits. Personally, I believe property visits should be done every 6 months. I know a lot of landlords like out of sight, out of mind. I really don't think that is a healthy way to go. So we PV our units every 6 months. And who does them? I have someone who is specifically trained to do my PVs. Her name's Wiz, and the tenants love her coming. They buy cakes in, they have a cup of tea. But Wiz is trained with damp, mould and condensation. While she's there, if she sees an issue or she sees a behaviour, she can have that conversation on a lovely level with the tenant. Yeah, it's not like a fact sheet coming over or anything. She will sit and explain and educate, and that's because we've spent the time to educate her. With your agents, if they're managing it, who's doing their PVs? Are you getting a copy of your PV that your agent is doing? Can you see what the condition of your property is? I would always make your PVs photographic. Again, you've got evidence of the condition of your property. And then again, as I spoke to you earlier about works orders, how do you manage? There's always, I pretty much don't ever get a PV back without a works order off of the back of it. How are you managing that follow-up to make sure you're on top of that? Am I out of time? I'm nearly done, actually. Last one. I'm getting the eye over there. I'm getting the evil eye. Communication, communication, communication. Prepare your property right up front. Pick the right tenant for the specific unit you've got. And continue to educate your tenant. I didn't understand how much water we expelled when we slept until I started doing this job. I had no comprehension at all. I didn't understand about drying my clothes indoors. I didn't understand about why there was water on my windows every morning when I woke up. I had no idea. Educate your tenant. Communicate with your tenant. There are some amazing handouts online. If you can't find one, send me an email and I'll ping you the one over that I use. A lot of the time, when we get a report in, so Again, I'm anal, so process. If a tenant reports damp, mould or condensation, I have a specific process that goes through. And the first thing is we send them a fact sheet and we actually ask the tenant to do some of the diagnosis because we show them what different types of damp, mould, rising damp, water ingress, we show it all in the handout. Your tenant can actually do a lot of your work for you if you educate them. They'll come back and say, oh, Joe, I think it's bridging across the damp work at the bottom. Yes, thank you. I know who I'm sending out. And I've educated them. We also send out annual reminders to our tenants. We change it every year so it's not the same old chisel that they're reading each time. But we keep that education going. There's some amazing links on YouTube, your videos. I went to my colleague, I've got those. We send those to the tenant. He went, I didn't even know they existed. I got told off. But there's some brilliant YouTube videos out there that you can use to educate yourself and your tenants. More than anything, just keep talking to your tenants. They want a healthy, balanced home to live in. They don't want... No one gets up in the morning and thinks, do you know what? I want to live in a hellhole. Let's see what I can do today to make this really horrid to live in. They want a nice home to live in. Less than me. Thank you very much.